Welcome. We're going to talk about zero and negative exponents today. Now, I was fortunate enough to, when I did my student teaching work under a man named Dr. Fandryer at Fitchburg State College. And wonderful guy, very knowledgeable, and he showed me this method of demonstrating how positive and negative and zero exponents all work. And I thought it was such a great thing. I've used it for the last 20 years. So one thing to keep in mind, we know that x to the first is x, and x to the second is x times x, and x to the third is x times x times x. I'm just going to set my board real quick. Sorry about that. Just is a little bit off. Hopefully it's not just me. All right. So when you're working with this, as you go up, you can see that you are continually adding 1 to the exponent each time you go up. And on the other side, as you go up, you are continually multiplying by x, which is the base. Now, what happens if you go down? Well, as you go down, you are subtracting 1 from the exponent. And as you go down on this side, you are dividing by the base, which is x. All right, what if I continue to do that? If I were to continue and take 1 away from the exponent, that gives me 0. Now, what happens on the other side? Well, I'm going to take x and divide it by the base, x. Well, with the exception of 0, anything divided by itself is 1. So anything other than 0 to the 0 power equals 1. If I have negative 65,000 to the 0 power, the answer is 1. If I have w to the 0 power, the answer is 1. So no matter what I'm working with other than 0, if it is to the 0 power, it equals the number 1. Now we could continue this process and go down 1 further. 0 minus 1 would be negative 1. Let me get rid of that so I have room. Now here's an interesting thing. I need a little bit more room here. That's better. When I have 1, I have to divide it by x, so I end up with 1 over x. All right. Well, what if I continue this? X to the negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. Now, if I took this and divided it by x, that's the same, with working with fractions, as multiplying by 1 over x. I multiply the tops together and the bottoms together, and I end up x to the negative 2 is 1 over x to the positive 2. More interesting. Okay, so what do you think x to the negative 3 will come out to? If you guessed 1 over x to the positive 3, you'd be right. And x to the negative 25 is just going to be 1 over x to the positive 25. And it just keeps going. So if you have a negative exponent, something raised to a negative power, and you want it to be a positive power, just move it to the other side of the fraction bar from where it is currently, whether it's on top, which we can put this over 1, or if it's on bottom, and move it to the other side of the fraction bar, and that will give you a positive exponent. So let's see that in action. Let's start with, well, we'll start with this one. I want these to have a positive exponent, so I'm going to just take this, move it down. That's going to make it a positive exponent. Move this one down, and I'm going to take, let's see, this one and move it up. So in the end, I have the z on top, and this becomes a positive 4. The x and the y on bottom, the x becomes a positive 2, and the y a positive 3. And that's all you have to do. Now I have only positive exponents. Most of the problems that we're going to be working with are going to ask you to have only positive exponents. That's what they want you to, how do you want you to write it? So now let's look on this side. What if I have this? Well, the first thing you should ask yourself is, what is being raised to the negative 3 power? Is the 8 being raised to the negative 3 power? No, it's not. Only the x is raised to the negative 3 power. So the only thing, now I can put this over 1, the only thing that's going to move is the x power. So I still have the 8 on top, and I've got x to the now positive 3 on the bottom. That's simplified, all done. You give these two a try. Write it with only positive exponents. By the way, a negative number is not a negative exponent, so that doesn't move. Only negative exponents move. Go ahead and give it a try. All right, let's take a look at this. Again, if it's not over, it's not a fraction currently, you can make it a fraction. And the only thing raised to a negative power here is the x, so I'm going to move it, and I have negative 3 over x to the positive 4. In this one, the z and the x are raised to negative powers, so those are going to both come down. And the w is raised to the negative power, that's going to come up. Now, I usually like to write these in alphabetical order. It's not necessary, but it is kind of nice. So the 6 on top, negative 5 on the bottom. Let's see, w comes before y. But again, it's not required that you put it in alphabetical order. X comes before z. And there you have your final answer, 6w to the positive 5. Y was always positive, so it didn't move. Positive 2 for an exponent, that is. Negative 5, x to the second, z to the third. Let's check this one out. See what you can do with it. See if you remember from the beginning how to deal with all of the parts. All right, so I can put it over 1 to make it a fraction. The z is got a negative power, so that's going down. What happens with the y? It's raised to the 0 power. It goes away as a number 1 times the 4 is still 4. And so the 4 times 1 is 4, x to the third over z to the second. And again, the y is gone because it was raised to the 0 power, which equals the number 1. All right, what happens when you're multiplying? Well, there are 2 ways you can do this. You could, I'll do it both ways. You could start by only moving the things that are raised to a power so that you only have positive powers. So I could rewrite this one as 2 over x squared y to the third, moving these down, times, and 4x over y to the fifth. I can do that. And then I have to multiply and simplify. So I have 8x over x squared y to the 8. Finally, I would reduce the x's so that I have 8 on top. The x is bigger on bottom, and it subtract 2 minus 1 is 1, y to the 8, and there would be my final answer. That's one way you could go about it. The other way you could go about it, let me just erase this so I have room, is you can work with it as it is and then afterwards move things that are negative powers. Here's what I mean. I know I'm going to multiply 2 times 4, that's 8. When I multiply variables to a power, I add their exponents. What is negative 2 plus 1? Negative 1. Negative 3 plus negative 5. Negative 8. So that ends up, negative exponents move to the other side, 8 over x, y to the 8. I could put a 1 if I like, but I don't have to. So you can see it works either way. Now, it's up to you to decide which way you find easier, because both ways are equivalent in difficulty and ability level. Here's our next one. Now, I can apply a negative power when you're raising to a power like this, but to be honest, unless there's no coefficients, this is very tricky to do. So what I would prefer you do is, if you have a negative power outside and you want this power to become positive, just flip the fraction over and it forces this to be the opposite sign. So for example, I flip this over, 3y to the 5 over 4x to the 2, and that changes that sign to a positive. Now apply the power. 3 squared is 9. Y to the 5th squared, remember multiply exponents, y to the 10. 4 squared is 16. X squared squared, I multiply the exponents, x to the 4th. And there's my final answer. There's no reducing possible here, so I am all done. All right, so you can, as I said before, you can choose to work with the negative powers, but I truly find when you're working with division, just move the things that are raised to the negative power, then simplify afterward. So for example, the 8 is on top, the 12 is on bottom. I'm going to move this x to the bottom and this z to the bottom. And I'm going to move the y to the top and this x to the top. So here I go. I'm going to rewrite, let's see. I'm going to put the y to the 3rd that didn't move. I know this might be a little out of alphabetic order. We can fix that afterward. And the z to the 8 that didn't move. So that's all that didn't move. The stuff that did move is x became positive 4 on top, y became positive 1 on top, x became x to the positive 2 on bottom, z a positive 4 on bottom. Now let's do simplification. 8 and 12. 4 goes into both. 2, 3. So 2 on top, 3 on bottom. I've got an x on top and an x on bottom. Bigger exponent is on top. And I subtract big minus small. Big minus small. I have y's both on top. And if they're both on top, you can see they're multiplied together. So that gives me y to the 3 plus 1 is 4. Z's are both on the bottom, multiplied together. I add their exponents, z to the 12. And there's my final answer. Okay. And that's it. So So that should get through all of your homework for tonight. Have a great day.